This deep dive is about Warrens and the movements that happen there. And to understand them, I've broken them down into three categories: reds, yellows, and greens. And if we can all understand which of those categories apply to us, we can make better decisions and really enjoy Warrens. I'm Mark, the transport guy. Now, Warrens came up repeatedly in the comments of the Tom Adams. And if you haven't seen that first deep dive, it is worth going back and having a watch to see what we did around the airport. We're going to dive into Warrens really closely today. We're going to first of all understand how it works, why it struggles. I'm going to naturally offer some solutions, and then we're going to run the Transport Guy Resilience Index and see how we get on. So let's go. Let's first of all locate ourselves. Warrens is a commercial hub in Barbados. It is located in the west of the island, and as a place, it is actually in the top 15 when it comes to the most congested corridors in Barbados. Warrens itself, well, the place had something of an accidental origin. Those of us who live in Barbados would remember that many years ago, this was nothing but cane fields. But how did we get here? When the businesses in Barbados wanted to move their corporate headquarters into glass buildings and high-density high-rises, that was never going to happen in Bridgetown because there's height restriction, and of course, there is the coral stone characteristic in historic Bridgetown. So they had to look elsewhere. So they looked to Warrens. And what happened was Busy Williams went there first of all, and then of course we saw a bank arrive, a government ministry arrive, restaurants arrive, and before you knew it, we actually had quite a lot of traffic on our hands. And that history is really important. Now, before we dive into Warrens, we're going to have to go up and go across the corridor because this matters, and it matters a lot for Warrens. Because to understand this relationship between Warrens and what is coming into it, we're going to follow a couple of characters. And these are the Transport Guy personas. And as I told you on the first deep dive, listen, traffic and traffic congestion is seldom about the roads and the vehicles. It is mostly always about people and the journeys that they want to make. So we're going to understand their characteristics, and we're going to understand exactly the movements that they are making in Warrens. And those movements are essential. And when we look at the movements in Warrens, just pay attention to the pressure that is being caused there. And to make this easy, I have color-coded this for you so that you can follow these details very, very carefully. So here we go. This is Brenda. Let's introduce her. She lives in Mile and a Quarter, and she works as an IT specialist at First Caribbean at their headquarters in Warrens. Now, Brenda is going to represent the red journeys in Warrens. You will see what I mean in a moment. She leaves home roughly around 7:30. She heads across the Ronald Map Highway, and she is making her way into Warrens. Pretty straightforward journey. Next, we have Winston. He, as you will remember from the first deep dive, Winston works at the airport. But on this particular day, he is going to a meeting in Warrens, and he needs to be there for 9 o'clock. So we're going to pick up his journey as he comes down from the bus roundabout, and he is making his way towards Warrens. Next, we have Marcia. Now, we're going to have two green journeys in this story, and you'll see what I mean. Marcia lives in Cane Garden, and she is heading to Bridgetown. She is only ever passing through Warrens, usually about 7:30 in the morning. She gets on the minibus, she is moving slowly, and she's coming through Jackson and heading towards the Everton Weeks roundabout. Then we have Andrea. Andrea lives in Wanstead, and she works at the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute of Technology in the Pine. She, again, is also passing through around 7:30, heading south in slow traffic. These are fictitious characters, but the journeys that they represent, they are very, very real. Now let's look at Warrens, the place, for a moment, because understanding how this place is constructed is important. In terms of the roads themselves, across the center of Warrens, we have a section of the ABC Highway, an element of the Arrow Barrow. To the east, we have the Everton Weeks roundabout, over which comes Highway 2, which is our direct connection into Bridgetown. To the west, we have the DRC Scott roundabout, where the Ronald Map Highway, or Highway 2 as we call it, originates and terminates. Then we have the Gordon Cummins element up to the university and down to the Mighty Grinder connection. And of course, locally, we've got a whole host of commercial accesses for access into the bank, the restaurants, the car dealerships, the gas station, Chauffette, you name it. There are a lot of attractors that draw people in to Warrens, and these are really important. At some point, all of those journeys are going to arrive right here in Warrens, and they're going to meet at this location. And here's how. First of all, Brenda is going to arrive to stay. She's going to park. She's our red journey. And here's the thing about Warrens. It isn't just full of traffic. It is full of destinations. I've estimated nearly 900 parking spaces we have, feeding this one center. Now, if you drill into that for a moment and translate that into movement per hour, let's go for what's likely to be, I don't know, a normal conservative estimate in Barbados. So we got a peak time arrival of about 75% concentration. That is roughly 675 vehicles arriving in the peak, or 330 per hour. Warrens is absorbing 300 to 400 vehicles in the peak, not passing through. These are coming to stay. That is the red pressure, what I'm going to call the parking and access pressure. And it looks like this. Around 900 spaces. That means 900 vehicles trying to arrive. Every one of those spaces attracts a trip, generates a movement, and creates a search behavior. Now, in addition to the red journeys, we also have the yellows. So Winston soon arrives, and Winston represents the yellow journeys in Warrens, and they present a significant challenge, not just because of one journey though, because of thousands of them. They want to arrive, occupy space, leave. Arrive, occupy space, leave. And you get that happening constantly throughout the day, all day long. It is very unpredictable, and of course, it disrupts the whole journey chain in Warrens. These are what I call the dwell pressure elements in Warrens. These yellow journeys, very, very disruptive. Then we have Marcia. Marcia simply wants to pass through and carry on down Highway 2 into Bridgetown. She's on the minibus and she is feeling the collective pressure, which is something that is often felt by people who are using public transport. Now, she isn't the only green journey, because as I said earlier, we also have Andrea coming down Hines Hill into Warrens, crawling through. Now, it is both of those journeys, both of those green journeys that we actually want to release. We need to release the greens. When is Warrens mostly congested? When is this really happening? This isn't random in Warrens, you know. It follows a pattern. The morning peaks tend to be around 7:15 to about 9:30. Then you get a heavy afternoon pressure. And it usually happens on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And the afternoons tend to be messy. So the evening peak is a lot longer. And that's because you got the pickup from schools, the commuter traffic, the shopping traffic, the trips out of Warrens redistributing towards the ABC and the northern corridors. This is all happening in the afternoon window. And that tends to spread from 3 till 6. Then Saturdays have its own characteristics. The profile tends to look a bit differently. The peak tends to build from around 9:45 on Saturdays, but that's mostly because the reds have disappeared, but they've come back as yellows on Saturdays, and that's important to remember. I feel like Warrens, we have to anticipate more pain, and I'll tell you why. Look, with the geriatric hospital not too far, but within the corridor, it will have 400 beds. It will have staff. People will come for visits. The building will need servicing. Then the Botanical Gardens is rising in terms of the number of events it is hosting. And of course, the National Stadium is going to finish construction at some point in time. So you've got to anticipate that within this corridor, we are going to see more red and yellow journeys. So you must know that this is going to be a challenge that needs to be resolved, because there will be a lot more greater demand for transport in this corridor. But let's take a breath. Let's catch our breath for a moment, because that is a lot to digest. Let's go up a level and let's look afar at what is happening. Because in truth, when we look at these problems and challenges that we have in Barbados, these things are nothing new. They might be new to us, but they are certainly not novel. We have to look, study, decide what is for us, and what we're going to create for ourselves. But these things aren't novel. So let me first of all go to Oxford. And this is a place that I know very, very well. I started my career there. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me. The truth is, Oxford as a place is quite fascinating. Back in 1973, they decided to adopt a philosophy. Cars to the edge, buses to the center. Drive, leave the car, complete the journey on the bus. And if you want to complete the journey in your car, it is going to cost you a lot of money. And I've had a few people in Barbados say to me, "Oh, park and ride is not for us because we don't park our car anywhere and do that kind of thing." But the reality is you have to see it as a system, and you have to see it properly implemented. And I'm talking about a park and ride system that is part of a basket of measures, and it is high quality, it is very simple, it is disciplined, and it's part of the way of how people allow their city to breathe and their place to breathe. And I'm going to come back to Oxford and do a proper deep dive in the next deep dive, in Deep Dive 3, because we got to lift our heads with the Barbados and look at this as a solution that is worthwhile. And the comparison is good, I think. So we can also look at the Singapore model, where they took a different approach with road user pricing, or what you would often see as ERP, electronic road pricing. If you want to drive to the busiest places in Singapore, you will pay. It's a different method to Oxford, but it's the same principle. And of course, when people mention Singapore, I often have to remind them that is a 2.6 billion investment that comprises a lot of data sensors, a lot of weather data, a lot of historic data, a lot of events data, and a complete traffic management strategy. You know, it helps Singaporeans to only lose 25 hours per year in traffic. They have spent a lot of money to get there. It's a journey. And this is the thing that we don't like in Barbados. We don't like going on journeys. We like destinations. But you see this traffic problem? This is not going to be about a destination. We have to go on a journey with this. And we have to start somewhere. And we have to start with our own solutions, or we have to look elsewhere and see what is going to work for us. So let's try and bring this back home for a moment. Not every journey needs to arrive in Warrens. Look, I think Park and Ride has a role to play in Warrens. And it is really important to be able to lift those red journeys like Brenda out of the center and put them on the edge. And that really is to help Warrens to breathe. And if we are going to really look at this as a solution, the way that I would design this is probably a little bit different to maybe what others might think. Warrens really needs a park and ride from Welch's, in my opinion, through Warrens, down to the geriatric hospital, out to the National Stadium, and back. That is the route that could really serve to help to reduce the pressure with the amount of demand that is going to come in that corridor in the not too distant future. The way that you have to do that is by providing bus priority on the hard shoulders that we currently have on the ABC highway. Dedicate those hard shoulders to public transport and cycling, provide greater opportunities and options for people to have alternative choices for how they access Warrens. Park and Ride has a big role to play, and that will have to be coupled with signal optimization to make sure that the buses can actually get to Warrens quickly. And I honestly think it can't be more than 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes maximum. And potentially, you can also look to see how you can service from the Norman Niles roundabout as well, with traffic coming in from Highway 5 coming from St. Philip, which is going to be really important. In addition to that, it really is time for Barbados to start exploring workplace travel plans. You know, we do a lot of this in the UK because it's about understanding the intelligence of where people are coming from and how they're traveling to work. And of course, if anybody wants to know a little bit more about that, get in touch. Happy to have a conversation with you about it. And then there really is a big opportunity, I think, in Warrens. If you can do something about the parking, we can then make Warrens more walkable. Because you see those 900 spaces? You can turn those spaces into good, high quality waiting environments for park and ride vehicles to enter and service the area. and also for the place to become a lot more walkable than it is at the moment. We have too many lunchtime trips being driven in Warrens, and part of the reason for that is the place is just not walkable enough for the people who are going there. So there are some solutions, and ultimately the businesses there can form a business improvement district where they can get together and start looking to see whether or not they might be able to provide a collective shuttle services for the people that are working in Warrens and work in partnership with the government to get an early stage park and ride going. It has to be part of the measures that are being considered in the overall package of Warrens. For each deep dive, we run what we call the Transport Guy Resilience Index, which is basically me applying a couple of metrics to determine how well a particular place or a location works. Now, in terms of network redundancy in Warrens, there are too few routes to Warrens. It probably works, but if something goes wrong, there really is not a lot of places to go. You're just going to have to sit in it. When it comes to operational flexibility, the system is fixed in Warrens. It doesn't adapt very well, and small disruptions can actually lead to quite big delays in Warrens, which I'm sure many of you have experienced. And those roundabouts tend to suffer a lot when the yellow journeys tend to disrupt them quite significantly. For access and connectivity, well, you can get there. You can get there. You might not get there very cleanly, but you can get there. Yes, there are many buses that go over to the highway to across the Everton Weeks, but a lot of journeys to Warrens are by car. Yes, it's very accessible, but you'll see how I've scored it in a moment. In terms of system reliability, look, you can't really predict when you're going to get to Warrens. We still might have a 9 o'clock meeting, but who knows what time he has to leave because the traffic is too unpredictable. And when it comes to the climate resilience and environmental factors, well, there's a lot of stop-start traffic in Warrens, and it's very inefficient, and it's probably contributing to the overall health of the people who drive and park and stay there every day. So this overall is how I have scored it. 2.4 out of 5. Warrens is not broken, and the truth is it needs better decisions about the existing movements. And the question that we now have to answer is this: should driving to Warrens be the default, or should it be a choice? This is what makes Warrens very different to the Tom Adams. The Tom Adams roundabout largely has a flow problem, at least the links around the Tom Adams roundabout, whilst Warrens has a flow and place conflict problem, which is compounded by the demand for parking that is scattered everywhere. So the next time that you're driving through Warrens, I hope that you'll remember whether you are red, yellow, or green. And again, if you haven't yet watched the Tom Adams Deep Dive, go have a watch. And of course, I'll catch you in Oxford on the next one.